Vincent has worked for 5 years at a promising tech startup where his college friend Thomas is also employed. They have been inseparable, sharing ideas and supporting each other. Vincent develops a revolutionary algorithm that will transform the company. He shares it with Thomas, first feeling confident in their friendship. The next morning, walking into an unexpected meeting, Vincent notices unusual tension. Before starting this heartbreaking story, let me know where you are watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if betrayal stories resonate with you. My journey to that fateful morning began long before I developed the algorithm. After graduating with a computer science degree from the University of Washington, I bounced between 3 different tech companies, never quite finding my place. Each position taught me something valuable, but nothing felt like home until I joined Innovate Tech, a promising startup developing artificial intelligence solutions for healthcare. The company culture emphasized creativity and collaboration, which aligned perfectly with my values. When a position opened up 5 years ago, I jumped at the opportunity, especially since it meant working alongside my college friend Thomas. Thomas and I had been inseparable since freshman year, when we were randomly assigned as roommates. We pulled all-nighters studying for exams, celebrated each other's victories, and supported each other through personal struggles. He was there when my girlfriend of 3 years left me for another guy, and I was there when his father passed away during our junior year. Our friendship was forged through countless shared experiences and genuine care for each other's well-being. When we both ended up at Innovate Tech, it felt like the universe was confirming our brotherhood. My dedication to Innovate Tech was partially driven by my family background. Growing up with divorced parents in a financially struggling household in Detroit, I watched my mother work 3 jobs to put food on the table. My father was mostly absent, appearing occasionally with grand promises he never kept. This upbringing instilled in me a fierce determination to create stability through my own efforts. Each promotion and bonus at Innovate Tech represented not just professional success but personal vindication that I could build something better than what I had known. The algorithm that would change everything began as a side project during my weekend coding sessions. I noticed patterns in patient data that suggested we could predict treatment responses with significantly higher accuracy than current methods. For 6 months, I dedicated every spare moment to refining this approach, often staying at the office until 2 in the morning, surrounded by empty coffee cups and takeout containers. I meticulously documented each iteration, breakthrough, and failure, creating comprehensive development logs that trace the evolution of my ideas. The potential implications for personalized medicine were enormous, potentially saving countless lives by matching patients with optimal treatments from day one. As the algorithm began showing promising results in preliminary tests, I could hardly contain my excitement about what this might mean for my career. The company had recently announced a director position opening in the innovation division, and a breakthrough like this would make me a prime candidate. I imagined presenting my work to the board, receiving recognition for years of dedication, and finally moving into a leadership role where I could guide the direction of our technology. The financial security of a director-level position would also allow me to help my mother retire early, something I had dreamed about for years. The evening before everything changed, I invited Thomas to dinner at our favorite steakhouse. Over perfectly cooked ribeyes and a bottle of Cabernet, I shared every detail of my algorithm with him, explaining the novel approach to data clustering that made it so effective. I walked him through the technical specifications, the mathematical foundations, and even my plans for implementation across our product line. Thomas listened intently, asking insightful questions that helped me refine my presentation for management. His face lit up with what I interpreted as genuine enthusiasm for my success. When I finished explaining, Thomas raised his glass in a toast. "To your brilliant mind, Vincent. This is going to change everything," he said with a smile. He suggested I prepare a formal presentation for our boss by the end of the week, offering to review my slides beforehand. He even promised to put in a good word with the executive team, mentioning his upcoming golf game with our CEO. I left the restaurant feeling grateful for his friendship and support, completely oblivious to what was coming. That night I fell asleep, feeling more optimistic about my future than I had in years. The algorithm represented not just a professional breakthrough, but personal validation that I belonged at the cutting edge of our field. With Thomas in my corner, I felt unstoppable, ready to take the next big step in my career. Little did I know that the foundation of trust I had built my hopes upon was about to crumble beneath my feet. The next morning, Thomas was notably absent from our usual coffee meetup in the break room. When I texted him asking if everything was okay, his response was uncharacteristically brief. "Busy morning. Talk later." I thought nothing of it until I noticed several executives hurrying down the hallway looking excited about something. An uneasy feeling began to form in the pit of my stomach as I made my way to my desk. Just before lunch, an email arrived from our administrative assistant announcing an emergency all-hands meeting in 15 minutes. The subject line read Major Innovation Announcement, with no further details. A flutter of anxiety passed through me. This was unusual timing for such an announcement, especially considering I had not heard about any major breakthroughs in our weekly department updates. I tried calling Thomas, but was sent straight to voicemail. The growing sense of unease intensified as I made my way to the conference room. As I approached the boardroom, I noticed it was already packed with employees from every department. The executive team sat at the front, all wearing expressions of barely contained excitement. My heart nearly stopped when I saw Thomas sitting at the head of the table beside our CEO, Jeffrey Winters. Thomas was dressed in his best suit, the one he reserved for client presentations, and was shuffling through what appeared to be presentation slides. He glanced up, saw me standing in the doorway, and quickly looked away. That moment of averted eyes told me everything I needed to know before a single word was spoken. Jeffrey stood up and called the meeting to order with a broad smile. Today marks a turning point for Innovate Tech, he announced. One of our own has developed a breakthrough algorithm that will revolutionize how we approach personalized medicine. My body went cold as Thomas stood up and took his position at the front of the room. With confident gestures and rehearsed enthusiasm, he began presenting my algorithm, my months of work, my breakthrough as if it were his own creation. I sat frozen in my chair, unable to process what was happening. The slides Thomas displayed contained my diagrams, my data, even some of my exact phrasing from our dinner conversation. He had taken everything I shared and packaged it as his own work, complete with his name on every page. The room faded around me as a high-pitched ringing filled my ears. Colleagues were nodding appreciatively, executives were taking notes, and Thomas was basking in their attention while I struggled to breathe. The technical explanation Thomas provided was almost verbatim what I had shared with him the previous night. He used specific analogies I had created to explain complex concepts like comparing the data clustering method to sorting a chaotic library by multiple overlapping systems simultaneously. These were unique explanations I had developed to make the complex mathematics accessible phrases and comparisons that existed nowhere but in my development notes and our private conversations. As he continued speaking using my words with practiced confidence, I felt physically ill. When Thomas finished his presentation, I raised my hand, desperate to speak up. Jeffrey nodded in my direction, but before I could form words, he said, "Questions after we discuss implementation, Vincent." Thomas smoothly redirected the conversation toward timeline projections. I tried again, moments later, standing up abruptly. "I need to clarify something important," I began, but Jeffrey cut me off. "Thomas has the floor, Vincent. Please respect the process." Several colleagues looked at me with confusion and mild annoyance. The message was clear: sit down and stop interrupting the celebration. The meeting concluded with Jeffrey announcing Thomas's immediate promotion to project director for the new initiative. "Thomas will be leading a dedicated team to implement his algorithm across our platform," Jeffrey declared, beaming with pride. Thomas accepted the position with a humble speech about teamwork and innovation, thanking everyone for their support while conspicuously avoiding any mention of me or my contributions. The room erupted in applause while I remained motionless, trying to comprehend how my life's work had been stolen in less than 24 hours. After the meeting dispersed, I cornered Thomas in the hallway, pulling him into an empty conference room. "How could you do this?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "We have been friends for 10 years. I trusted you with everything." Thomas straightened his tie and regarded me with cold detachment I had never seen before. The warmth that had characterized our friendship was completely absent from his eyes. "It is just business, Vincent. You were too slow to act," he replied with disturbing calm. "In this industry, ideas only matter when you bring them to market. You would have sat on this for months, more perfecting every detail while opportunities passed us by. I did what was necessary for the company." When I mentioned going to Jeffrey with the truth, Thomas smiled without humor. "It is your word against mine. Who do you think they will believe, the newly promoted director or the programmer known for being cautious to a fault?" He left me standing there shattered and alone as he walked off to his new corner office. The next 2 weeks were a slow descent into professional hell. Though I still technically worked on the algorithm implementation team, I found myself systematically excluded from key meetings and decisions. Thomas established a new project management structure that effectively sidelined me, assigning me to documentation tasks, while others handled the core development. My access to the central codebase was restricted under the guise of streamlining workflows, leaving me unable to contribute meaningfully to the project I had created. Each morning, I dragged myself to the office, with growing dread, watching my creation being dismantled and reassembled incorrectly by people who did not understand its fundamental architecture. My colleagues, once friendly and collaborative, began treating me differently. At first, the changes were subtle. Coffee invitations that stopped coming, conversation that halted when I approached the break room. Gradually, the isolation became more pronounced. I overheard whispers about my attitude problem and how I was jealous of Thomas's success. One afternoon, I discovered that Thomas had been having private lunches with key team members, during which he subtly implied that I was struggling with his promotion and spreading negativity. Several colleagues I had considered friends began avoiding me entirely, not wanting to be associated with someone who was apparently falling out of favor with management. 3 weeks after the announcement, I was called into Jeffrey's office for what was described as a routine performance review. The atmosphere was tense as I sat across from the man who had once told me I was one of the company's most valuable assets. "Vincent, there have been concerns about your collaboration skills recently," he began, not quite meeting my eyes. "Several team members have reported that you seem resentful of the new project direction and have been undermining Thomas's leadership." When I tried to explain the truth, Jeffrey held up his hand. "This is not about the algorithm ownership. This is about your behavior since the project launched. We need team players at this critical juncture." The meeting ended with the news that I was being transferred to the Legacy Systems Maintenance Department, effectively a demotion to working on outdated products being phased out. "We think this might be a better fit for your current mindset," Jeffrey explained, handing me transfer paperwork. "Take some time to reset your perspective." The subtext was clear: accept what happened, or find another job. As I walked out of his office, I saw Thomas watching from across the open workspace, a small, satisfied smile playing at the corners of his mouth. In that moment, I understood that this transfer was not Jeffrey's idea, but the next phase of Thomas's plan to remove me entirely. My mental health began deteriorating rapidly. Insomnia became my nightly companion, with thoughts of betrayal and injustice playing on repeat whenever I closed my eyes. I would lie awake until 4 in the morning, replaying our dinner conversation, searching for signs I should have noticed. My appetite disappeared and I lost 15 pounds in just weeks. Anxiety attacks struck without warning, sometimes forcing me to lock myself in a bathroom stall until I could breathe normally again. Friends outside work noticed the change, but I was too ashamed to explain that I had been outmaneuvered by someone I had trusted completely. The professional identity I had carefully built over years was crumbling, and I had no idea how to stop it. The company holiday party in December became the stage for my public humiliation. I had considered not attending, but decided that absence would only confirm the rumors about my poor sportsmanship. I arrived late, hoping to make a brief appearance before slipping away unnoticed. As I entered, Thomas was in the middle of a speech, champagne glass in hand, surrounded by admirers. "The algorithm implementation is proceeding ahead of schedule," he was saying. "We expect to revolutionize patient care by second quarter." Then he spotted me hovering near the entrance. "Vincent, come join us. We were just discussing how sometimes the most brilliant innovations need the right person to champion them properly." Laughter rippled through the group as all eyes turned to me. The intentional cruelty of the comment made my hands shake as I forced a tight smile and retreated to the far corner of the room. That night, lying sleepless in my apartment, I seriously contemplated quitting. I updated my resume and browsed job listings until sunrise. With my experience, I could likely find another position, possibly even with a competitor. But as dawn broke over the Seattle skyline, a realization crystallized: leaving would mean Thomas won completely. He would retain my algorithm, my reputation would be damaged by the circumstances of my departure, and nothing would change, except that I would no longer have to see his face every day. The injustice of it burned through my exhaustion, igniting something new, a determination I had not felt since the night I completed the algorithm. I decided then that I would not leave, at least not until I had reclaimed what was rightfully mine. Working late one evening in my new basement office, I accidentally discovered the first piece of evidence that would change everything. While searching the company server for historical data needed for my legacy systems work, I stumbled upon an archived email thread. Thomas had written to Jeffrey the morning after our dinner, urgently requesting a meeting at 7 a.m. about a major breakthrough. The timestamp showed the email was sent at 11:30 p.m., barely an hour after we had parted ways. Further searching revealed more emails where Thomas claimed to have been working secretly on this project for months. yet could provide no specific documentation when Jeffrey requested it, promising instead to compile his notes after the post. Announcement. Energized by this discovery, I began methodically searching for more evidence. Late nights in the office yielded additional findings, including a revealing incident during an implementation meeting I was not invited to, but had received minutes from. A senior developer had questioned Thomas about the mathematical foundation of a specific component, a particularly complex element I had based on an obscure research paper. According to the minutes, Thomas had fumbled badly, unable to explain the core principles before deflecting with promises to circle back with more details. 3 similar incidents appeared in various documentation, each showing Thomas's fundamental lack of understanding about how the algorithm actually functioned at its most advanced levels. He had memorized my explanations well enough to present the concept, but lacked the deep knowledge needed to answer unexpected technical questions or guide implementation decisions. Instead of confronting Thomas immediately with what I had found, I realized a more strategic approach was necessary. Raw emotions and accusations would only make me appear bitter and vindictive, playing directly into the narrative Thomas had created. I needed irrefutable evidence presented calmly and systematically, leaving no room for misinterpretation or dismissal. This would require patience and careful planning, qualities I had previously applied to my algorithm development but now needed to direct toward reclaiming my work and reputation. I reached out to Margaret Wilson, a senior engineer who had been with Innovate Tech since its founding and was respected for her technical expertise and uncompromising integrity. Under the pretense of needing her insights on a legacy system problem, I invited her to lunch at a cafe several blocks from the office. Once we were seated in a quiet corner, I carefully shared my situation, providing specific technical details about the algorithm that only its true creator would know. Margaret listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly troubled, as I explained how certain mathematical approaches in Thomas's algorithm were direct extensions of research work I had published 2 years earlier in an industry journal under my name. The connection between those published methods and the current algorithm is unmistakable to anyone with sufficient technical background, Margaret confirmed after reviewing my evidence. No 2 engineers would independently develop such similar approaches with identical mathematical quirks. She agreed to quietly review the full technical documentation and verify whether the algorithm contained elements that aligned with my previous work and research interests rather than Thomas's. Her position as a respected neutral party would be crucial if my claims were challenged. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt a glimmer of hope that the truth might eventually come to light. Over the next 2 weeks, I meticulously documented everything related to the algorithm's development. I recovered old notebooks, email threads discussing early concepts with other teammates, time-stamped code commits to my personal development environment, and even coffee shop receipts, showing where I had worked on weekends, corresponding with breakthroughs in the development timeline. I created a comprehensive chronology that demonstrated my continuous work on the concept over 6 months, contrasted with Thomas's complete lack of documented development activity until immediately after our dinner. Each piece of evidence was cataloged and cross-referenced, building an airtight case that would be difficult to dismiss. While I was building my case problems with the algorithm, implementation began emerging exactly as I had anticipated. Without understanding the mathematical intricacies of how different components interacted, Thomas was guiding the team down several problematic paths. The predictive accuracy dropped significantly when applied to diverse patient populations. Predictive accuracy dropped significantly when applied to diverse patient populations. A problem I had already solved in my original design. 2 major healthcare clients expressed concerns about inconsistent results during preliminary testing. The implementation team was working overtime, trying to troubleshoot issues that stemmed directly from Thomas's misguided direction. The project was falling behind schedule, with the promised second quarter delivery date looking increasingly unrealistic. After gathering comprehensive evidence and confirming my technical claims with Margaret, I requested a private meeting with Jeffrey Winters and our Chief Technology Officer, bypassing normal protocols. This was a high-risk move that could backfire dramatically if handled poorly, but the mounting implementation problems created the perfect opportunity to present my case. In my email request, I stated only that I had critical information about the algorithm project that impacts company interests, intentionally avoiding any mention of Thomas or ownership disputes. To my surprise, the meeting was scheduled for the following morning. I arrived at Jeffrey's office with a meticulously organized presentation, including a technical document verified by Margaret, my complete development timeline, with supporting evidence and examples of implementation problems caused by Thomas's lack of understanding. I began the meeting not with accusations but with solutions explaining how specific issues the team was encountering could be resolved through approaches I had originally designed. Only after establishing my deep technical knowledge did I carefully reveal the full truth about the algorithm's development and Thomas's deception. I presented email evidence, development logs, and Margaret's independent technical assessment confirming my claims. As the meeting progressed, Thomas was called in to address discrepancies in my account. Faced with the mountain of evidence and technical questions he could not answer, his carefully constructed facade began crumbling. When the CTO asked him to explain a specific mathematical approach in the core algorithm, Thomas stumbled through a fundamentally incorrect explanation that revealed his lack of understanding. His confident demeanor dissolved as more technical questions exposed gaps in knowledge that the algorithm's true creator would never have. When confronted with the timestamp of his email to Jeffrey, sent just after our dinner, Thomas became defensive, claiming I had shared only basic concepts that he had substantially developed. His explanation grew increasingly convoluted and inconsistent as he tried to account for the damning evidence. The investigation that followed was thorough but swift, conducted with surprising discretion to protect the company's reputation with clients and investors. Thomas was placed on administrative leave, while a technical committee reviewed all evidence. 3 senior engineers independently confirmed that the algorithm architecture aligned with my previous work and contained approaches I had published in earlier papers. My development logs showed a clear evolution of the concept over months, while Thomas could produce no meaningful documentation of his claimed contribution. Within 2 weeks, the truth was undeniable. Thomas was terminated for intellectual property theft and ethical violations, while I was reinstated to my rightful position as the algorithm's creator and project lead. In a move that surprised me, Jeffrey called an all-hands meeting to publicly acknowledge the situation. Innovate Tech has always prided itself on integrity and innovation, he stated to the assembled team. Recent events forced us to reaffirm these values. I want to personally apologize to Vincent for the failure in leadership that allowed his groundbreaking work to be misattributed, and to announce his promotion to Director of Innovation, where he will lead the algorithm implementation moving forward. The public acknowledgement meant more to me than the promotion itself, beginning the process of restoring my damaged reputation among colleagues who had believed the worst about me. The healing process began slowly, as I stepped into my new role, leading the project. Some colleagues approached with awkward apologies for having believed Thomas's version of events, while others simply resumed normal interactions without addressing the elephant in the room. I focused on the work itself, correcting implementation problems and getting the project back on track, rather than dwelling on lingering resentments. In quiet moments, though, the emotional toll of the betrayal still hit hard. Rebuilding trust, both my trust in others and their trust in me, would be a much longer journey than reclaiming credit for my algorithm. 6 months after the truth came to light, the patient response prediction system, powered by my algorithm, launched successfully with several major healthcare providers. Early results showed a 96% accuracy rate in predicting optimal treatment protocols, significantly improving patient outcomes while reducing unnecessary procedures. As project director, I had assembled a talented team that understood both the mathematical foundations and the practical applications of the technology. We worked collaboratively with each contribution, clearly documented and credited, creating a culture that valued both innovation and integrity. The professional vindication was deeply satisfying, but more meaningful was the knowledge that my work was finally fulfilling its purpose, potentially saving lives through more personalized medical care. Rebuilding professional relationships proved more challenging than fixing the algorithm implementation. Some colleagues still seemed uncomfortable around me, perhaps reminded of their own quick judgments during the controversy. I approached these relationships with patience and clear boundaries, focusing on present work rather than past events. I made a conscious decision to be more guarded with my ideas and personal information, sharing innovations through proper channels with appropriate documentation rather than informal conversations. This caution did not mean isolation, however. I formed new, deeper friendships with team members who had stood by me or apologized sincerely for their earlier doubts, building connections based on mutual respect and demonstrated trustworthiness, rather than easy camaraderie. At an industry conference in Boston, I unexpectedly encountered Thomas in the hotel lobby. He had found a position with a smaller competitor, though at a significantly lower level than he had held at Innovate Tech. For a moment, our eyes met across the crowded space, and the flood of emotions nearly overwhelmed me. anger and hurt, rising fresh, as if no time had passed. Thomas made a move, as if to approach, perhaps to offer some explanation or apology, but seemed to think better of it, nodding slightly before turning away. I watched him disappear into the crowd, surprised to find that alongside the anger, I also felt something unexpected, a kind of pity for someone who had sacrificed a genuine friendship and his professional integrity for a temporary advantage that ultimately cost him everything. That brief encounter sparked an important realization during my flight home. For months, I had carried the weight of betrayal like a stone in my chest, revisiting the hurt during quiet moments and allowing it to color my interactions with new colleagues. I recognized that while Thomas had stolen my work, I was allowing him to continue taking from me by holding on to this anger. The bitterness I nursed was not harming Thomas, who had moved on to a new position, but was instead limiting my own capacity for joy and trust. Releasing this burden would not mean excusing what he did or forgetting the lessons learned, but rather choosing freedom from the emotional prison the experience had created. The betrayal fundamentally changed my approach to both work and relationships in ways that proved unexpectedly valuable. I became more methodical about documenting my innovations from the earliest stages, creating clear paper trails that established ownership. In team settings, I developed a leadership style that emphasized both individual recognition and collective success, ensuring that each person's contributions were visibly acknowledged. Most importantly, I learned to balance openness with discernment, sharing ideas generously, but with appropriate protections in place. These changes made me not just a better innovator, but a more effective leader who could foster creativity while protecting both the company's and individuals' interests. One particular moment stands out in my journey toward healing. 6 months into my role as director, I interviewed a brilliant but obviously nervous young programmer named Alex, who reminded me of myself, fresh out of college, full of ideas, but uncertain of his place in the competitive tech world. During his coding test, I noticed an innovative approach to a problem that showed remarkable creativity. After hiring him, I made a point of highlighting this specific contribution in his first team meeting, ensuring everyone knew this clever solution had come from our newest member. The look of surprise and pride on his face reflected my own early career desires for recognition, and belonging reminders of the person I had been before betrayal made me cautious. In building my department, I deliberately fostered a culture where integrity was valued as highly as innovation. We instituted a collaboration framework that emphasized transparent attribution of ideas, with regular review sessions where team members could present concepts and receive documented credit before development began. When cross-departmental projects emerged, we established clear agreements about intellectual property and recognition from the outset. These practices not only prevented the kind of theft I had experienced, but created an environment where people felt safe, sharing breakthrough ideas, knowing their contributions would be respected and acknowledged. The resulting atmosphere of trust noticeably increased both productivity and creative problem-solving across the team. The experience with Thomas, painful, as it was ultimately delivered unexpected benefits I would never have anticipated during those dark weeks after the betrayal. My technical abilities strengthened as I was forced to articulate and defend the mathematical foundations of my work in ways I might otherwise have never done. My leadership skills developed more rapidly under pressure than they would have through gradual advancement. Most surprisingly, my emotional intelligence grew enormously as I navigated the complex human dynamics of rebuilding trust and managing perceptions. The very events that had nearly broken me professionally became, in retrospect, an accelerated growth trajectory that positioned me for greater impact than a smooth, undisturbed career path might have provided. The deepest lesson I carried forward was about the nature of resilience and integrity in professional life. Success built on deception proves inherently unstable, as Thomas discovered when his lack of understanding undermined implementation. Conversely, work grounded in genuine innovation and honest attribution creates a foundation that can withstand challenges and scrutiny. I learned that integrity is not merely an admirable personal quality, but a practical advantage in building sustainable success. By remaining true to your values, even when others abandon theirs, you develop an internal compass that guides decisions more reliably than external validation or temporary advantages ever could. Have you ever experienced betrayal by someone you trusted completely? How did you handle that situation, and what lessons did you learn from that painful experience? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life stories about overcoming professional challenges. Remember to share this with anyone navigating workplace difficulties who might need to hear that integrity ultimately prevails. Thank you for listening to my journey from betrayal to redemption, and I wish you the courage to stand your ground when facing injustice in your own life.